My name is Michael Carter. I'm from Austin, Texas, and if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's this: people may try to humiliate you in front of the world, but karma doesn't wait long to show its face. At my daughter's wedding, I was reminded of that lesson in the loudest, most painful way possible, because her fiancé thought he could embarrass me in front of everyone I loved. But what he didn't know was that when you build your pride on lies and arrogance, it only takes one moment for it all to come crashing down. "Sit down, old man," he spat across the reception hall, his voice sharp, meant for every guest to hear. "Nobody here came to listen to you. This is my wedding, not your show." His words sliced through the music, the laughter, the clinking glasses, until silence fell over the crowd. I froze, my hand still gripping the microphone, my chest heavy as my daughter stood between us. Her smile trembling, her eyes darting, torn between her father and the man she was about to marry. I had only stood to give a short speech, a blessing for my daughter, a few words of love from a father's heart. But he twisted it into something ugly. His face burned with a smug grin, daring me to answer him, daring me to retreat and give him the stage he thought he owned. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some whispering, some staring wide-eyed, waiting for me to fight back or break down. I set the microphone down slowly, my hands shaking, but not from fear. No. From anger. Years of sacrifice, years of swallowing my pride just to make sure my daughter had everything she needed, suddenly mocked by this entitled boy who thought money and a rented tuxedo made him a man. I took a step toward him, my voice low, steady, but burning with fire. "You may think this day is only about you," I said, every syllable vibrating in the stunned silence, "but you forget this is about family. And you don't get to erase me from hers." He laughed, loud and cruel, like my words were a joke. "Family? You? You're nothing but a washed-up mechanic who couldn't even keep his own marriage together. Look around, this entire wedding was paid for by my family. You should be thanking us, not pretending you matter here." The crowd gasped, and my daughter's face drained of color. His parents smirked in the corner, clearly enjoying the scene, as though this was all part of some game they had planned. In that moment, I felt the years of hardship, the nights working double shifts at the garage, the mornings packing school lunches, the weekends fixing up old cars just to make rent, all boiling inside me. He thought he could define me by my scars, by what I had lost. But those scars were proof of every battle I fought to raise my daughter alone after her mother walked away. Proof of love. Proof of survival. I clenched my fists, but instead of throwing the punch my body begged for, I raised my voice so everyone in that hall could hear the truth. You can buy flowers, you can rent a ballroom, you can wear the most expensive suit money can find, but respect? Character? Love? Those things aren't for sale. And I promise you this, one day, every mask you wear will fall. He sneered, stepping closer, inches from my face, his cologne sharp and suffocating. Big words, old man. But at the end of the night, she's mine. And you? You'll be nothing but a sad memory sitting alone in your little workshop. His arrogance stung, but I didn't move. I held my ground, staring into the eyes of a man who thought cruelty made him powerful. Then it happened. Karma walked in, uninvited and merciless, right on cue. One of the servers, rushing in from the side door, tripped over a loose cord, sending a tray of champagne glasses flying through the air. The crash was deafening, shards exploding across the floor, bubbly soaking into the expensive carpet. But the worst part wasn't the mess. It was the secret that came tumbling out with it. Because along with the glasses, a small, velvet jewelry box slid across the floor and landed at my daughter's feet. Her fiancé's face went pale. He lunged forward, too late, as she bent down and picked it up with trembling hands. She opened it, and the room collectively gasped. Inside was a delicate diamond bracelet, engraved, unmistakably, with another woman's name. A name none of us recognized, but a name her fiancé clearly knew all too well. My daughter's hand shook as she held it up, her voice cracking. "What is this?" she demanded, her eyes wide, wet with betrayal. The entire hall leaned in, every guest frozen, the music long forgotten. He stammered, sweat beading on his forehead, his confidence draining as quickly as the color in his cheeks. It's not what it looks like." But it was. Everyone knew it. And in that instant, the man who had just tried to humiliate me stood exposed, stripped of his arrogance, stripped of his lies. Karma didn't wait for tomorrow. It showed up right there, in front of everyone, reminding him and reminding me that truth always wins louder than pride. I turned to the crowd, my voice steady now, carrying a moral I had lived my whole life. You see, money can buy a stage, but it can't protect the character of the man standing on it. It doesn't matter how hard someone tries to bury you in shame, truth has a way of digging itself out. And when it does, the whole world sees who's really standing tall, and who's crumbling. The hall buzzed with whispers, his parents whispering frantically to each other, his friends avoiding eye contact. My daughter's eyes filled with tears, not of weakness but of realization. She saw the man she almost gave her life to. She saw the mask crack wide open. And she looked at me not with shame, not with embarrassment, but with something far greater. With love. With pride. With the clarity of truth. That was the night everything changed. That was the night my daughter realized not all fathers wear suits and hand out blank checks. Some fathers wear oil-stained shirts, carry calloused hands, and fight like hell just to keep love alive. And in the end, that's worth more than all the money in the world. So let me leave you with this: never let anyone tell you that your worth is measured by what you own. Your worth is measured by how you love, how you stand, and how you never, ever let the lies of others define your truth. Because in the end, karma doesn't need an invitation. It shows up on time, every time. And that night, at my daughter's wedding, it came faster than anyone expected. The room was still. You can almost hear the sound of 100 heartbeats thundering at once, every guest waiting for my daughter's next move. She stood frozen, clutching that velvet box, the name engraved into the bracelet burning into her memory. Her fiancé, this arrogant, smug boy who had just mocked me moments before, was now stammering like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. I can explain, he croaked, reaching toward her with trembling fingers. His voice had lost all its bravado, all the venom that dripped from his tongue when he tried to humiliate me. Now it was small, weak, pitiful. My daughter recoiled, her lips trembling as tears welled in her eyes. Explain what? She shot back, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Explain why another woman's name is engraved inside a bracelet you were hiding on our wedding day? Explain why you thought you could embarrass my father just to make yourself look like a man? Her words cracked through the silence like thunder. Gasps rippled through the hall. His parents shifted uncomfortably at their table, their smug expressions gone, replaced by pale faces that screamed panic. I stood just a few feet away, my chest heaving, my fists still clenched at my sides. Part of me wanted to step in, to shield my daughter from the storm unraveling around her. But another part, the father who had raised her alone, who had taught her to stand strong, knew this was her moment. She had to see him for who he really was, not who he pretended to be. Her fiancé licked his lips nervously, his eyes darting to the crowd as though searching for an escape. It's nothing serious, Emily, he stuttered. Just a mistake. A silly mistake. That bracelet was a gift for a client. A client, she repeated, her voice trembling with rage. She held the bracelet up so everyone could see. A diamond bracelet, with a woman's name engraved inside it, and you're calling it a client gift? Do you take me for a fool? He lunged forward, trying to snatch it from her hand, but I stepped between them, my arm firm, my body a wall. My voice came out low, deadly calm. Touch her again, and you'll regret it. He froze, his bravado crumbling under my stare. For the first time since I met him, he looked small. Not powerful. Not in control. Just small. The guests shifted, whispers rising like a wave. Some were murmuring the name engraved inside the bracelet, repeating it until it echoed through the room. Others were shaking their heads, whispering about how quickly masks can fall. Emily's breathing grew ragged, her hands trembling as she looked around the hall. Was everything a lie? She whispered, her voice breaking. All the promises, all the words you fed me, was it all just lies? His face twisted, desperation replacing arrogance. No. No, baby, please, you don't understand. But she cut him off, her voice sharp, commanding. Don't call me that. Don't you ever call me that again." The hall erupted into murmurs, guests covering their mouths, some shaking their heads in disbelief. I stood there, watching the man who had dared humiliate me just minutes earlier now humiliated himself, exposed in front of everyone. And though part of me wanted to revel in it, another part felt the sting of my daughter's pain deeper than any insult he could ever throw at me. I stepped forward, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. She turned to me, her eyes wet, her voice breaking. "Dad, what do I do?" I took a deep breath, fighting the lump in my throat. My words needed to be strong, steady, not just for her, but for everyone listening. "You walk away," I said firmly. "Because a man who disrespects your family will one day disrespect you. And a man who lies before vows will lie after them. You don't marry a mask, Emily. You marry the truth." The room went silent again. My words hung heavy in the air. His parents looked like they had swallowed nails, their faces twisted in anger and shame. His mother whispered something urgently to his father, and I could see the panic in their eyes. They knew this wasn't just a ruined wedding. This was a ruined reputation. Her fiancé's mask slipped completely now. His desperation turned to anger, his voice rising, sharp and defensive. "You think you're so high and mighty, don't you?" he spat at me, pointing an accusing finger. "You've been waiting for this, haven't you? Waiting for me to slip up so you could swoop in and be the hero. You're nothing but a bitter old man who couldn't give your daughter the life she deserved." I didn't flinch. Instead, I stepped closer, my voice low but cutting. "Maybe I couldn't give her a mansion or a trust fund. But I gave her something you'll never understand. I gave her honesty. I gave her loyalty. I gave her love that didn't come with conditions or lies. And that," I said, my voice echoing in the hushed hall, "is worth more than every dollar in your father's bank account." Emily wiped her tears, her breathing steadying as she looked at me, then back at him. "You know what," she said, her voice suddenly strong. "My father's right. He's always been right. And you're nothing but a coward." The guests gasped again. Her words hit him harder than any punch could have. He staggered back a step, his face red, his eyes darting like a trapped animal. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. For once, he had no words. Emily took a deep breath, her hands shaking as she removed the ring from her finger. She held it out to him, her voice steady. "Take it. I don't want your lies. I don't want your money. And I sure as hell don't want a future with a man who disrespects my family." The ring clattered as it hit the floor, the sound ringing louder than any vow could have. The entire hall erupted, some in whispers, some in applause, some in disbelief. His parents stood abruptly, their chairs scraping across the floor, their faces twisted in outrage. But it was too late. The truth was out. The mask was off. The wedding was over. And as I stood there, holding my daughter as she cried into my shoulder, I knew one thing for certain: what began as an attempt to humiliate me had ended with his humiliation instead. But deep down, I also knew this wasn't the end of the story. Because men like him, spoiled, entitled, greedy, they don't just disappear quietly. And as much as I wanted to believe karma had already done its work, I had a feeling this was only the beginning of the storm. The ballroom was no longer a celebration, it was a battlefield. The music had stopped, the flowers and candles seemed like useless decorations, and the guests sat stiff in their chairs, whispering like 1,000 bees buzzing at once. All eyes darted between my daughter, her broken engagement ring lying on the floor, and me, the father who had dared to stand tall when everyone expected me to bow my head. Her ex-fiancé stood there, red-faced and furious, his fists clenched at his sides. His parents were already rushing toward him, his mother whispering frantically, "Pick it up. We can still fix this, say something, do something." His father's jaw was tight, his voice sharp as a blade. "You're not going to let this mechanic destroy everything we've built. Take control of this now." That word, mechanic, burned in my ears. They said it like it was poison, like it was a curse that made me less of a man. And maybe once, years ago, I would have hung my head. Maybe I would have swallowed that insult and let it eat me alive. But not anymore. Not after all the years I fought for my daughter, all the nights I stayed awake wondering how I would keep the lights on, how I would keep her safe, how I would prove to her that love didn't walk away just because her mother did. I turned slowly toward his parents, my voice low but steady. Don't you dare blame me for the mask your son chose to wear. I didn't buy that bracelet. I didn't engrave another woman's name in it. That was his choice, his truth, and now it's his shame. The guests erupted again in murmurs, some nodding, some shaking their heads. The truth was loud, and no amount of money could muffle it. Emily's ex-fiancé snapped. You think you're a hero, don't you? He shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of his own unraveling. You're nothing. You couldn't keep a wife, you could barely keep a roof over your daughter's head, and now you're pretending you're some kind of role model? Look around you. Nobody respects you. They're laughing at you behind your back. The words stung, not because they were true, but because once upon a time, I believed them myself. I remembered the nights I sat alone in that garage after closing, grease on my hands, sweat on my brow, telling myself I wasn't enough. That I was failing her. That no matter how many hours I worked, no matter how many cars I fixed, I couldn't give my daughter the life I wanted to. But then I looked at Emily, my daughter, my reason, my anchor. She stood there, shoulders trembling, but her eyes locked on mine, full of something that washed every doubt away. Full of pride. I stepped forward, my voice cutting through the noise. You're wrong, I said firmly, staring directly into his eyes. People aren't laughing at me. They're learning from me. They see a man who never walked away. A man who never lied to his child. A man who fought, day and night, so his daughter would know love is real. Even if it came with struggle. And you? You've had everything handed to you, but the first time truth knocked on your door, you crumbled. Gasps rippled through the crowd. His mother's hand shot up as if to silence me, but I wasn't finished. Money can buy silence, I continued, my voice growing stronger, but it cannot buy respect. And today, everyone here has seen the difference between a man who earns respect and a boy who demands it. The applause started small, just a few claps from the back. Then it spread, wave after wave, until the hall was thundering with hands, the sound of approval washing over me like a tide. His parents' faces turned white, their anger suffocating as they watched their son shrink smaller and smaller under the weight of truth. Emily grabbed my hand, squeezing it tight. Tears streaked her cheeks, but her voice was clear as she said, "Dad, thank you. For everything." I wanted to collapse right there, to let the years of pain spill out of me. But I stood taller instead. This wasn't just about me. This was about every father, every mother, every person who had ever been told they weren't enough because they didn't have money or status. This was about proving that love beats arrogance every time. Her ex-fiancé's mask finally cracked completely. He snarled, his voice dripping venom. You think this is over? You think you've won? You're nothing, Michael Carter. Nothing. And I'll make sure you regret this. The threat hung in the air like smoke, ugly and bitter. His parents pulled him back, hissing at him to shut up, but it was too late. The words were out. The guests had heard them. And I knew, deep down, that he meant them. Emily turned to him, her voice shaking with rage. You've already given me enough to regret. Don't come near me again. Ever. With that, she turned away, pressing herself against me as the crowd erupted once more, some applauding, some whispering, some already pulling out their phones to spread the story faster than wildfire. And I knew then that my fight was far from over. Because men like him, spoiled, entitled, fueled by pride, don't just vanish. They come back harder, darker, more desperate. And the way he looked at me before his parents dragged him out told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just about a broken engagement anymore. This was about a battle of pride, of power, of truth. And if he thought humiliating me once was his victory, he hadn't seen anything yet. Because this time, I wasn't fighting alone. This time, my daughter was standing beside. The ballroom emptied out in fragments, some guests storming off, others whispering as they filed toward the exit, and a few lingering, waiting to see what would happen next. The smell of spilt champagne still clung to the air, the shards of glass still glimmering under the lights, as though the night itself refused to let go of the chaos. I held my daughter close, her trembling body pressed against me, while his parents gathered in a corner with their son. They weren't consoling him. No, their voices hissed like snakes, sharp and panicked. "Do you realize what you've done?" his father seethed. "Do you know how this will look in the papers? Our name is everything, and you've dragged it through the mud." His mother's tone was colder, sharper. "This isn't just about her, or him," she snapped, her manicured finger pointing at me like a dagger. "That man," she spat the word as though it was filth, "has been nothing but a thorn from the start. He humiliated you in front of everyone, and now people will believe his version of the story. We cannot let that stand." I could feel their eyes burning into me, trying to turn me into the villain of their son's downfall. It wasn't enough for them that their boy had betrayed my daughter, they wanted me to carry the blame, too. Emily pulled away from me slightly, her eyes wet but determined. "Dad," she whispered, "they're going to try to spin this. They're going to make you look like the problem." I nodded. "I know. That's what people like them do. But truth doesn't need spin, Emily. It stands on its own." Still, the words tasted heavy in my mouth. Because I knew the kind of power his family wielded. Money didn't just buy weddings, it bought silence, bought headlines, bought forgiveness where none should exist. And I was just a man with calloused hands and a worn-down garage. One of the guests, a family friend of theirs, approached me with a sneer. "You should have stayed in your lane, Michael," he muttered loud enough for others to hear. "You embarrassed your daughter tonight. If you had just kept quiet, none of this would have happened." I turned slowly, meeting his gaze with fire. If telling the truth embarrasses someone, then maybe it's the lie that's the problem, not the truth. He flinched, but others nodded, murmuring in agreement. That's when I realized the room was divided. Some guests whispered on the side of wealth and power, clinging to their connections with his family. But others, many more, were whispering in support of me and my daughter. I thought back, just for a moment, to when Emily was small. When her mother walked out, leaving me with nothing but a crib, a pile of bills, and a baby who depended on me for everything. I remembered the nights rocking her in my arms while the world outside felt like it was caving in. I remembered staring at my hands, black with grease, wondering if I could stretch another week's paycheck far enough to keep the lights on. I never told Emily how many dinners I skipped so she could eat, how many birthdays I stayed up fixing old car parts to afford one small gift. She didn't need to know that. What she needed was to see her father smiling, telling her she could dream big, that she deserved every good thing in the world even when I wasn't sure I believed it myself. And now here she was, grown, standing in a gown she should have worn on the happiest day of her life, crying because of a man who thought he could buy her love, and mocking the father who gave everything for her. I wasn't going to let them rewrite that story. Not tonight. Not ever. His father stormed toward me suddenly, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor, his voice booming. "You think this is over, Carter? You humiliated my son, and I will not allow a man like you to stain our family name. Do you understand who we are? Do you understand what we own in this city?" I held his stare, unflinching. "Do you understand who I am? I'm the man who raised a daughter with nothing but my two hands. I'm the man who worked until his bones ached just to make sure she never went without love. You can own every building, every business in this city, but you don't own me. And you don't own her." The guests gasped, some applauding quietly, others frozen in shock at my audacity. His father's face went crimson, veins bulging in his neck, but before he could respond, Emily's voice rang out, clear and steady. "He's right," she said, stepping forward, her gown swishing softly against the floor. "You don't own me. I may have been blinded for a while, but I see the truth now. Your son doesn't love me, he loves control. And you don't want a daughter-in-law, you want another trophy. Well, I won't be part of your collection." The room fell silent again, her words slicing through the tension like a blade. Her ex-fiancé's face crumpled, his voice breaking as he spat, "You'll regret this, Emily. Nobody walks away from me. Nobody." But this time, she didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She looked him dead in the eyes and said, "Watch me." It was in that moment I felt something shift. My daughter wasn't just my little girl anymore. She was a woman, standing tall, choosing truth over lies, strength over weakness. And yet, deep down, I knew his threat wasn't empty. Men like him, families like his, they didn't forget. They didn't forgive. They retaliated. As the last of the guests trickled out, I walked Emily outside, the night air cool against our skin. The stars overhead felt distant, cold, as though even they were holding their breath. She leaned against me, whispering, "Dad, what happens now?" I swallowed hard, pulling her close. "Now, we keep moving forward. Together. They can throw every stone they want, Emily. But stones don't break truth, they only prove it." What I didn't say, not out loud, was that I could already feel the storm brewing. His words, his parents' glares, the whispers in the hall. They weren't finished with us. They were just beginning. And I had a choice to make. Stay silent and let them control the narrative, or fight harder than I ever had before. I had spent years fixing cars, putting broken pieces back together. But now, it was time to fix something much bigger. It was time to show the world that no amount of power could erase a man's truth. And if they thought humiliating me was the end of this story, they had no idea what was coming. The week after the wedding felt like living in a storm. The kind of storm that doesn't announce itself with thunder but creeps in quietly, twisting everything around you before you realize you're in the middle of it. It started with whispers. Neighbors who used to wave suddenly crossed the street. Parents at the diner where Emily and I sometimes grabbed breakfast leaned in a little too close, their voices carrying just enough for us to hear, "That's the guy who ruined his daughter's wedding. Did you hear what happened? They say he forced her to call it off." The story had been twisted, warped, and repackaged. By the time it hit the papers, it read like I had been the problem all along. Mechanic father interrupts high society wedding. Daughter humiliated by family drama. I knew exactly who was behind it. His father. A man with more lawyers than friends, more influence than conscience. He didn't just want to bury the truth, he wanted to bury me. At the garage, customers stopped showing up. Cars that were supposed to come in for repairs were cancelled at the last minute. My phone rang less and less until one day, it didn't ring at all. Word had spread, and it wasn't by accident. Someone with power had poisoned my reputation, and in a small city, poison spreads fast. Emily saw it happening. She tried to hide her worry, but I could see it in her eyes every time she walked into the garage and found me sitting there with my hands still, my tools untouched, the silence heavy. "Dad," she said softly one night as we sat at the kitchen table, bills scattered between us, "you can't let them do this to you. You've worked too hard to let them destroy everything." I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. "I've been fighting battles my whole life, Emily. But this one's different. They don't fight with fists or words. They fight with power. With lies." She leaned forward, her voice sharp, determined. "Then we fight back with truth. The same way you stood up to him at the wedding. The same way you raised me." Her words cut through the fog that had been clouding my mind. She was right. I had taught her to stand tall, to never let lies define her. Now it was my turn to live up to my own lessons. The next morning, I walked into the garage, flipped the sign to open, and started working even though no one came. By noon, I posted a video online, just me, standing in my oil-stained shirt, looking straight into the camera. "My name is Michael Carter," I began. "I'm a mechanic. I'm also a father. Last week, at my daughter's wedding, a man tried to humiliate me in front of everyone I loved. But that's not the story you've been told. You've been told I ruined the day, that I embarrassed my daughter. That's a lie. The truth is, my daughter's fiancé betrayed her. And when his lies came out, his family decided to bury me instead of facing the truth. But here I stand. I'm not rich, I don't have powerful friends, and I don't own a single newspaper. What I do have is the truth. And I won't be silenced. I didn't expect much. Maybe a few neighbors watching, maybe a handful of people who cared. But by evening, the video had thousands of views. By the next day, it had spread far beyond our city. Comments poured in from strangers saying, "Stay strong, Michael. We believe you." Parents wrote, "You're the kind of father we all hope to be." For the first time since the wedding, I felt the ground under my feet again. Truth was louder than money. But the storm wasn't finished. 2 nights later, as I locked up the garage, headlights blinded me. A sleek black car pulled up, and his father stepped out, dressed sharp, his presence heavy as ever. "You think you're clever," he sneered, walking toward me. "You think a sob story on the internet changes anything? This city is mine, Carter. Every business, every headline, every door, you only walk through them because I allow it." I wiped my hands on a rag, meeting his eyes. "Funny. Last I checked, I don't need your permission to tell the truth." He smirked, stepping closer, lowering his voice. "Be careful. You've already taken enough from my son. Don't make me take something from you." His words weren't empty. They carried the weight of a man used to getting what he wanted, no matter who he crushed along the way. But I didn't flinch. I'd faced worse storms that threatened to drown me when Emily was just a baby in my arms. "I'm not afraid of you," I said quietly. "You can take my business, my money, even my reputation. But you'll never take the one thing you've never had: respect. And that's why you'll lose. Because respect isn't bought, it's earned." His jaw tightened. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned sharply, slid back into his car, and disappeared into the night. I stood there, heart pounding, sweat on my brow. For a moment, fear clawed at me. What if he was serious? What if his threats weren't just words? But then I thought of Emily. Of the strength in her eyes, of the way she had stood up to her ex that night, and I knew backing down wasn't an option. The next morning, the garage phone rang for the first time in days. Then it rang again. And again. Customers I'd never met were driving in from miles away, people who had seen my video, who wanted to give me their business just to show support. By the end of the week, the garage was busier than it had ever been. Emily walked in one afternoon, her face lighting up at the sight of the full lot. "Dad," she whispered, her eyes shining, "you did it." "We did it." I shook my head with a smile. "No, Emily. Truth did it." But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. The ex-fiancé hadn't spoken since that night, but I could feel his shadow still lurking. Men like him don't vanish, they wait, they plot, they strike when you least expect it. And if his father's threats were anything to go by, the real battle was still ahead. The day started calm, too calm. The garage was full, customers chatted in the waiting area, and Emily had just brought me lunch. For a brief moment, it felt like life was finally steady again. But storms don't knock before they arrive. They slam the door open and demand your attention. It was around noon when the black car pulled up. Sleek. Expensive. Menacing. I froze when I saw him step out, the ex-fiancé himself. No smug grin this time, no polished charm. Just bitterness carved into every line of his face. He didn't come alone either. 2 men stepped out behind him, built like walls, their suits tight around their shoulders. Emily stiffened beside me. "Dad, what is he doing here?" I put a hand on her arm, steadying her. "Stay inside," I murmured, though my own pulse hammered in my chest. He walked straight toward me, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Michael Carter. The man of the hour. Internet's favorite mechanic. I guess you're enjoying your 15 minutes, huh?" I didn't answer. I just stood, waiting, watching. His sneer deepened. "You ruined me. Do you understand that? The whole world thinks I'm a liar, a cheat. My business deal's gone. My friend's gone. Even my own father is questioning me. And it's all because of you." I shook my head slowly. "No. It's because of your choices. I didn't ruin you, you did that yourself." The words hit him harder than a punch. His face twisted, rage boiling over. You think you're better than me? You think you've won? Let me show you what winning looks like. Before I could move, he nodded to one of his men. The giant reached into the car and pulled out a thick envelope. He tossed it at my feet. Papers spilled across the concrete: deeds, contracts, lawsuits. You're finished, he spat. I've filed claims, bought out your suppliers, cut off your credit lines. By the end of the week, you won't have a business. You'll have nothing. Let's see how many people cheer for you when you're back on the street. Emily gasped, her hands trembling. Dad. I bent down, picked up one of the papers, scanned it quickly. Legal jargon. Aggressive, but shallow. Half of it wouldn't hold in court. Still, the message was clear: he wanted to bury me alive under the weight of his father's money. I looked up, meeting his eyes. You're still the same coward you were at the wedding. Hiding behind money. Hiding behind men who do your dirty work. You can file 100 papers, but you'll never break me. And do you know why? He laughed bitterly. Enlighten me. Because I've already lived through worse. Nights with no heat. Weeks with no food. Raising a daughter alone with nothing but these two hands. You think losing a business scares me? I've lost everything before and I came back stronger. And this time, I'm not alone. Emily stepped forward then, her voice shaking but firm. He's right. You can't hurt us anymore. Because the truth is out. Everyone sees you for who you really are. And that's why you're standing here, desperate and angry. Because karma doesn't miss. It caught you. And it will keep catching you. Her words silenced him. For a flicker of a moment, doubt crossed his face. But pride is a powerful poison. He straightened, clenching his fists. This isn't over. Then karma arrived. Not in whispers. Not in subtlety. But loud, public, undeniable. Another car pulled up. This one wasn't sleek. It was official. Blue and red lights flashed across the street as two officers stepped out. The ex-fiancé's face drained of color. Name of ex-fiancé, one officer called firmly, you're under arrest. Fraud, embezzlement, and multiple counts of falsifying financial records. The silence that followed was deafening. His men backed away instantly, hands raised. The officer snapped cuffs onto his wrists before he could even protest. This is a mistake, he shouted, thrashing. Do you know who my father is? This is illegal, I'll have your jobs. But the officers didn't flinch. They read his rights as neighbors and customers gathered outside, whispering, pointing, watching. The same community he thought he controlled now stared at him like he was a stranger. Emily stood taller beside me, her hand gripping mine. For the first time, she looked at him not with fear, not even with anger, but with pity. Goodbye, she said softly. I hope someday you learn what respect really means. They dragged him to the squad car, his protests fading into the sound of doors slamming shut. The black car was left abandoned, a hollow shell of power that no longer belonged to him. I exhaled slowly, the weight of months lifting off my shoulders. Around us, customers clapped quietly. One of them muttered, about time. Another said, truth wins. I looked at Emily, her eyes shining with relief, and whispered, it's over. She shook her head, smiling through tears. No, Dad. It's just the beginning. The beginning of peace. That night, as we closed the garage, I sat back and thought about everything, the humiliation, the threats, the battles, the fear. And I realized something I wished I'd known sooner. Money fades. Power crumbles. But respect, the kind you earn through love, sacrifice, and truth, that's eternal. That's what carried me. That's what saved us. And that's the lesson I want to leave with anyone listening: never bow to lies. Never let arrogance define your worth. Stand firm in the truth, even when the world tries to bury you. Because karma is patient, but it always arrives. Always.